Good morning. I'm not using the lapel mic, so I hope you can hear me okay. But I wanted to share with you the sounds and sights of what I'm experiencing on my back porch this morning. Let's see if I can, while the camera's on, you can see my view. It is a beautiful day in Robertsdale, Alabama. And it's a beautiful morning to spend time with God. The other day when the radio host shared that the name of the endangered animal was the Vietnamese mouse deer, fanged mouse deer, also known as the silverback chevrotain, I wondered if the whole radio program was a joke. I thought maybe it was a hoax. But as they continued to talk, I thought maybe not, maybe this is serious. I knew one thing: I was glad to be on my way home because I was going to do an image search for this bizarre creature they were talking about on the radio. And sure enough, when I got home and did a search, I found images of this real animal that's front half looks like a red mouse or maybe a red deer with the face of a mouse, and the back half looks like a silver giant deer. It was a very strange creature and I'd never heard of it before. But I'm the kind of person that when I hear about something, sometimes I just need someone to show me. As they say, an image is worth 1,000 words, or a picture is worth 1,000 words. And sometimes when someone is telling me about something, I really need to see it. Number one, sometimes I need to see it to believe it, but I also need to see it to understand it. Somebody can try to explain something to me, somebody can try to get me to understand something, but I really have to see it sometimes to wrap my whole head around it. And I got to thinking, what if it's the same with God? I mean, even if you subscribe to some kind of sacred scriptures like the Bible or another sacred text, what if someone could just show us God? If we could see Him, if we could have an image or a picture of who He is and what He's like, wouldn't that make sense of a lot of things? Wouldn't that answer a lot of our questions and solve a lot of our human dilemmas if we could finally wrap our minds around the God of the universe and the mysteries of who He is and who created us and where we came from could finally be revealed? Well, this morning I want to share that that's exactly what has happened. Colossians, small book of the New Testament that I read out of yesterday, in chapter 1, verses 15 through, probably I'm going to read through 23, says, "The Son, Jesus Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in Him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through Him and for Him. He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. And He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn among the dead, so that in everything He might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all His fullness in Him, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through His blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now God has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in His sight, without blemish and free from accusation, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you have heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant." The visible image of the invisible God. That's amazing. Everything we read about God, everything we can hear about God, everything we can try to understand about God is all wrapped up in one person, and His name is Jesus. And so if we can just see Jesus, we can actually see God. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, you've kind of pulled a fast one because we can't really see Jesus anymore. I mean, at one point He was a historical figure, a human being walking around on this planet, but He's not anymore. We can't see Him. And what I have to say to that is that all of us can read His words, can read His life, can read His character, and can even experience the person of who He is through a relationship with Him, through the Holy Spirit, which we can simply receive by asking God for it. If we ask God for the Holy Spirit, and if we receive God's Holy Spirit, He will give Him to us. At the end of John's Gospel, The gospel writer writes in chapter 20 toward the end this account of Jesus reappearing. It's almost like Jesus is being reintroduced to his disciples after the resurrection. And Jesus appears to them physically in his resurrected form. And what I love about this is he's still a physical being. He doesn't show up like a ghost. I mean, he's physical to the point that they can touch him, but he appears behind locked doors. And so he's still a physical being, but he's otherworldly in his resurrected body. And so he's reintroduced in a way to his disciples, in particular Thomas, because Thomas wasn't there when they went to the tomb and discovered it empty and discovered the miracle that Jesus had been raised from the dead. And Thomas said, unless I put my hands in the holes where the nails pierced him and attached him to the cross, I'm not going to believe. And so Jesus shows up and he says to Thomas, peace be with you. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. This was the confession of Thomas's belief. But then Jesus says this, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Then the gospel writer adds these words, kind of summing up the reason for this whole gospel, the book of John. In John chapter 20, verses 30 and 31, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. That's my prayer for you today, that you would know God by knowing Jesus, that you would believe in him, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And that in this time of quarantine and maybe isolation where you feel disconnected, that you would feel even more connected to God, the God who has made himself visible, the God who has revealed himself through his Son, Jesus Christ, and that you would get to know Jesus more every day, and that in doing so, you would know and feel connected to the God of the universe who's got the whole world in his hands. I pray that he blesses you today. This is Pastor Jonathan of Robertsdale United Methodist Church. Grace and peace.